Good morning and welcome to the final session in the first series of Entering the World of International Trade. I am Karen Shannon and my co-host is Jay Friedman.
Hi, everyone.
Before we start our final session, a quick reminder that all 4 sessions will be online for viewing at exportevents.com and also linked to the Metropolitan Baltimore Women's Business Center. This morning, we will have an opportunity to hear from an international trade consultant from the Maryland Small Business Development Center and also from the Custom and Border Protection. Questions will be addressed at the end of each session. Once again, thank you for joining us. I'd like to introduce Gabe from Maryland Small Business Center, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself as you outline what resources that you have and that you can provide to the small business community. Thank you, Gabe, for joining us.
Thank you, Karen, so much for inviting me. I'm very delighted. Good morning, everyone. I'm very delighted to be here and to present about 10 to 15 minutes this morning to really give you guys a sense of what services are available as far as for first-time exporters or even the seasoned exporters, and also share some PowerPoint slide. Actually, Karen, can I share a screen here, or I would like to have my slide? Okay, so let me see if I can do that. Share a screen.
I'll stop sharing and you can start sharing.
Okay, excellent. All right, there we go. All right, so let me open up the slide here quick. There we go. All right. So what I would like to start doing first is to give you guys a little introduction and background about myself, and then move forward with the slides. And then I will be available for question at the end. So this will be about 10 to 15 minutes, as I mentioned. And so my name is Gabe Omaru. I've been with the Maryland SBDC. SBDC stands for Small Business Development Center. And I've been with the organization for about a little bit more than 10 years now. And I started as an office manager, and then I moved on to become a consultant, working with a local client. And then within the last 5 years, I've been sort of pivoting and working with exporters, helping clients who are exporting their product and services overseas around the world. And this is aligned with SBA, the Small Business Administration compliance, that SBDs should also provide such services to folks like you guys looking to export for the first time. Prior to that, I had about 10, 15 years of tenure within the corporate, corporate America, but I also work for nonprofit organizations. So I have some experience, and I'm very happy to be here again to assist you guys and to share some valuable information that I feel will be will help you as you move forward as an exporter. One of the things that I always tell my clients is that Baltimore, the state of Maryland has the potential, because not only that we are located within the nation's capital area, but also the Port of Baltimore is one of the largest ports in the country. And a lot of surrounding states do ship product out of the Port of Baltimore. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. So there's this class that I call Export 101 that I teach at Morgan State University, where my office is located at, prior to COVID in live, but now virtually online. But basically what it does is give you a sense of export readiness. Are you ready to export? What do you need to have in place for you to be a successful exporter? And one of the things that I start by telling my client when I start my consultation meeting with them is that if your product or your service is doing well locally, then you have the potential to do well internationally as well. What someone likes in Maryland, somebody else would like it in Brazil or in Canada or in Germany or in Singapore. So that's the idea. How how do you know that you're ready to export? It doesn't have to be daunting. There's a lot of resources available, at the local, at the state, and at the federal government level to assist you. And that's what this is all about. We provide one-on-one, I don't use the word free because free doesn't have value, but I say one-on-one, no cost services to our client. So you can sign up, tap into our services, and our export team is strong of 5 people. So there are consultants beside me who also give advisement and strategies on how to export internationally. So today we're going to talk about very quick here. We're going to talk about export readiness, and we will also talk about how to gain international market, how to strategize. Why would you pick Peru, not the neighboring country of Chile, for example? That's the kind of topics we'll discuss here. So for you to be, I mentioned that for you to be successful internationally, your product or services have to be doing well locally. It doesn't have to be that way. You can, start exporting, from the get-go, but ideally try to make sure that your company has the capability, because it's double, if you will, work that you will be doing than if you're just selling locally, right? So do you have the logistic in place? Do you have an agent? Do you know that you will be paid? Because that's really what a lot of clients that I work with, the issues that they bring up, forward is that they're not sure how to get paid. So do you have all that in place? Are you aware of that country or region that you want to sell your product? Do you know the culture? Have you been there? Do you speak their languages? Do you have someone who can do all that for you? So the kind of question you want to make sure you check. You also want to make sure there's a commitment from the company. If you're a company of 5 people, from top to from the exact, the CEO all the way to the administrative person, is everybody on board? Is there a commitment here that, you're willing to do this? Because again, it takes a lot more than if you're just selling locally, right? Operating, funding, planning, like I said, upper management commitment, all these are essential for you. You have to make sure everything is aligned before you can start sending your product or services overseas. Prior to that, though, you also want to sort of have a feasibility game place, feasibility plan in place. So create an export plan, just like you do a business plan for a local, restaurant or a local landscaping company. Do create we strongly encourage that you create an export plan, and we help with this. I'm going to show you guys a document here that has all the different sections of such plan, right? So determining the potential market, the countries, region. Are you required to have a license? Is there any restriction? Can you send your product to Venezuela or Cuba? Maybe not. Can you send your product to Iran? Maybe not. So you got to be aware, and you have to be knowledgeable about what you're doing, because there are fines. They can even shut down your business. So it is important that you have your check and balances in place. Identifying potential customers, the pricing point, the cost of your product. Again, if you're selling locally, you might just pay the local sales tax, right, in the city of Baltimore or in the state of Maryland. But guess what? If you're selling overseas, there are some extra taxes or duties and fines, custom. I guess the other panelists will talk about this, but there are some associated costs that you have to factor into selling your product. And also, American products are very, very highly regarded overseas. So for that, you can adjust. I mean, if the demand is high, you can, take an inch up. Just make sure that at the end of the day, you're profitable, because you want to be profitable at the end of the day. That's what this is all about. You're not in business for fun. You're in business to be profitable and to grow. And as I mentioned, how to get paid. So I'm going to actually open up a document here that talks about export plan. So this might be too tiny writing for you guys, but I'm just going to go through it very quick. It's about 14 topics, like a dozen topics here that you have to cover when you're talking about writing an export plan. So got to have an executive summary, which I would recommend that you write after you finish writing the plan. You have to have obviously your company description, you know, company background, why you're doing what you're doing, you know, why you're selling your product to Germany and Canada, why not in Chile? You know, is it an LLC? What's your mission? What's your vision? What's your long-term, short-term goals? All these have to be addressed under the company description. The next section will be your product or services that you actually providing. What if the market gets saturated? What's your exit strategy? What's your plan B? So you have to make sure that that is in place as well. And this export plan is not only helpful for you as far as, you know, exporting and benchmarking and knowing where you are, but also if you should go to Exim Bank and ask for a loan or a capital to grow your company, they will require for you to write a full export plan. So they will read the plan. They're just not going to loan you based on you showing up and being, you know, interviewed and making the case. You have to have a written document. Sometimes the underwriter is not the person you talk to. You might talk to the lender, the banker, who will submit all your information to an underwriter, who that person will read, and based on how convinced they are, they will issue the loan or deny the loan. So what I tell folks is when you're writing that export plan, you're writing a convincing, persuading document. You're not informing, but you're persuading them. You're saying, hey, I have a concept here, put your pennies down, because down the road, not only that I will pay you back the principal, but I will pay you interest as well. So that's how you will have to approach this. Market selection, you know, to the country or the region of the world where you're sending your product, you know, how stable is it? Are they free trade agreements? Can you take advantage of some free trade agreement where maybe you don't have to pay duties and taxes? Another section of the document will be your competitive analysis, your niche, you know, what make you strong, your SWOT analysis, what make your business model the best business model. How can you not only meet the competition level, but the competition? How you know, all this have to be into the export plan. Your cultural assessment, how knowledgeable are you about the culture of that country? I have a client who's sending product in Canada, and then now because some area in Canada, they speak French in Quebec. So they start saying, well, your label has to have some French, you know, information as well. So that's what we're talking about here when we say culture. You know, labeling your product, resizing them, all that good stuff. Marketing and sales, huge, you know, what's, you know, beyond social media, beyond the traditional marketing, what else do you have there for folks to know that your product are coming from the United States and that your product are valuable and it means something to them, right? Because people don't care how much the product costs sometimes. They really, what they care about, what customers want, when they buy your product, what they looking for is what your product does to them. You know, what do they get out of it? So they don't care if the toothpaste costs them $10. If another one costs $3, the $10 has best quality, they don't mind spending the $10 on it. So that's what we're talking about here. So the regulatory and compliance issues. There are companies that get fined because they're not filing the right paperwork. They're not doing it the right way. So make sure, you know, are you required to have a license? Are you required to have a certification or certain documentation in place for you to send your product overseas? Check all that before you start sending your product. Risk mitigations. Like I said, there are some area of the world where transaction, you know, banking system is, you know, or political issues. There are certain things, cyber security. There are certain things that you have, again, to make sure that it is in place, that there's no risk, zero risk for you in order for you to ship your product and make sure there's the sales. You know, it might sound like a lot, but again, it is in your interest, in your benefit to make sure you checked all these boxes. Operation logistic, if you know your product is very welcomed in that region of the world, how equipped are you? What are your capacities? Can you respond to demand? If all of a sudden the demand spike up, you know, can you respond to that and make sure that your customers are getting your product? And also an action plan, what to do next. How can you achieve it? Where, you know, how can you move forward? How can you expand your services? I mentioned earlier, what if the market gets saturated? What is your plan B? You might be selling a product in a certain region of the world, but because of the dynamic of the market, you might add something else that has nothing to do with the product that you initially wanted to sell, just sort of to give yourself a leverage to be competitive and to be in the area. Pricing consideration, cost, you got to know how to price your product. Again, you are in business to be profitable. So, you know, from the port of Baltimore all the way to the port in Singapore, if you're sending your product there, how, you know, what's the insurance cost? How much is you warehousing, loading, shipping? All these costs should be factored in the final pricing for you to be profitable. And then your financial analysis, revenue projections, you know, the cash flow analysis, all this, we have tools available to help you do that, you know, to see what the inputs are. And after you factor everything else, what is the output will be like? What will be your end game, the net profit that you will be generating? So that's what I have on the export plan. Those are the kind of topics you want to think about. It's about 15 of them here, 15 different topics. Even if you get 2 pages on each topic, guess what? You're talking about 30-page document right there. 30, you know, 40, 45, I've seen 50-page document. So again, you might say, oh, this is too much, but again, you got to do your homework, right? If you want someone to put down a penny and invest into your company, whether it's a bank or a commercial bank or a private investor, you have to persuade them, you have to convince them, you have to show them that you've done your homework. That's how this operates. So if you're not fully engaged in it, if you're hesitant, if you can only produce a 2-page document and tell me, let's go to the bank, I'll tell you not so fast, because your marketing section should be more than 7 pages itself. So, you know, do your homework, due diligence, and then you will get, you know, the bank, they don't mind giving you $1 million if you qualify for it. But again, make sure you have all these things in place. You also want to make sure that I mentioned, you know, cost, you know, overseas investment, overseas renting there, you know, salaries. If you got to pay someone over there, tariffs, investment, and all that have to be factored. That's why I said when you exporting, you're doing double work that if you locally sell. And a lot of time people will be doing well locally before they start, you know, they're now sitting on inventory. Neighboring Canada is not far from Maryland. I have a client who's in Annapolis who sells more in Canada than they sell in Hawaii. Nobody buys the product from Hawaii. It's far away, yet it's a part of the United States. So, you know, how much revenue will you make? What's your gross profit? What's your revenue growth model, and all that to be in place. Product modification, depending on where you send your product, you might require to have a different packaging. I mentioned Canada earlier, what customers want, some regulation that are in place. You have to make sure that you're complying again. You don't want to be fined. It could be very expensive. $10,000 would be more sometimes when you don't do it the right way. So that's why our services, our organizations are in place here. The Maryland SBDC is just one of them, but there's so many, more than 40, I believe, agencies are involved in exporting. The State Department, the Department of Commerce, even, you know, the Treasury Department, you know, making sure that everything is being done in a proper way. Okay, the last section of today's quick presentation, the market entry strategy, right? So where do you get the information? You want to send your product to China or to Japan? You have no clue. You've never been there. You don't know. You know your products are in demand in that area of the world, but how can you get the data? So there are available databases. I actually have a whole list of them where you can do research. There are also private organizations such as the World Bank, you know, Global Edge, developed by this University of Michigan, I believe, is a tool. Export.gov. I'm sure someone mentioned that prior to my presentation. There are numbers of data sources that you can utilize to get information, to make sure that, you know, there's a risk, zero risk for you sending your product there. Are they free trade agreement with, you know, countries or region of the world that you can tap into that will, you know, sort of reduce your cost of sending your product? What are the barriers? What are challenges? You know, political and economical stability, all that need to be checked. Then another way to do this is also to look into similar product, right? If someone, let's say, you know, you will look at what your competition is doing, your competitors, but if you cannot get information. What is it? How are the similar products are doing in that region or in that country? How much are they pricing? You know, what is the local culture look like? You know, what is the landscape, the geographical stability of that region? Again, are you selling your product in foreign currency, in US dollars? You know, the conversion, all these things got to be considered. And then the final slide here is if you will do e-commerce. First of all, if you selling overseas, and I don't care what country you send your product, we will recommend that you have a strong website, and not only in English language, but also in that local language. If you're sending your product in Spain, in Madrid, maybe have a button on the website that the local folks there can click on and read everything about your services in Spanish, right? If you're selling in Germany, same thing. So make sure that you invest in this. Now, you don't have to do it from the get-go, because obviously everything we're mentioning here is costly. It could be expensive to build an international, reputable website. But again, the more you invest, the more you do the research, the better, and customers can easily get access to your services and your product. The search engine optimization is very easy to do it here locally, but how about international market? If someone is in Madrid, you're selling a specific product, a telephone case, they Google, they want the local search engine optimization to bring up your company. So you have to be locally present, and you have to be locally present in that language. I mentioned, export.gov, where you can get a country specific, every country is on that website with all the details. It's almost like a bio of that whole nation, as far as culture, economic strength, challenges, all that is available to you. And then and finally, using social media is, for local businesses using Facebook, Pinterest and Instagram and so on and so forth has been very helpful. But internationally also, there are certain area of the world, like if China use WeChat, right? It's a social media platform. WeChat is one of them that, Chinese folks utilize. There's another one, I forget the name of it. But anyway, you have to figure out, in Russia, there's a certain platform that they use. Depending on where you are, what country you're in, you got to be really up to date. And that's why I tell my client, try to attend, trade missions if you can afford it. And there are help from the state, where if you travel, you come back, they can give you a grant up to $5,000. If you have all your receipt, you can apply for that grant. But again, traveling, going to a trade mission, going to trade shows. There's a lot of trade shows in New York, but also in Germany, Austria and Australia, everywhere. Australia, everywhere in the world. So make sure you attend those trade shows. Make sure you travel. Make sure you're comfortable with those countries and cultures, and at least certain element of it before you can start, shipping large amount of product to those areas of the world. So that's pretty much what I have for you. I mean, this is a condensed 10-minute, 15-minute presentation, but this is something that I do for an hour. We go through the details and how to get a license, how to do this, how to do that, how to file this documentation is huge. Compliance is huge. International trade. So this is just to give you guys a snapshot of what you need to do. But again, it's feasible. It's not daunting. You don't have to be, 514 companies to be exporting. You can be a small company of 2 people or 1 person, yet, successfully export. So I encourage you guys. I'm very delighted to be here once again. And I hope that I, made a little difference in what you're trying to do. And Maryland SBDC International Trade Unit consultant are available if you're local here, and we can further work with you. And other organizations are available as well. So I thank you for your time, and I yield back to you, Karen.
All right. Thank you so much, Gabe, for all this very valuable information. Does anyone have any questions that from our audience?
Darren, let me start off. I raised my hand. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so Gabe, thank you very much. That was extremely on topic, and something I think we wanted was sort of an overview of what an export plan would look like. You did an excellent job of outlining it. One of the questions I have you seen, you said you've been doing this for years. Have you seen more of a trend when people start off? Are they selling directly to consumers and customers in foreign countries, or is it more finding distributors and retail outlets, if it's a retail product, in those countries? Have you seen a trend one way or the other, or does it run the gamut for both types of distribution?
Yes, so the latter, the second part. So for it depends, again, it depends on what the company does, what product is selling, and where they're selling it. If you're selling for the first time, I will recommend, and what I've seen is actually utilizing distributors who will carry your product, because they have the capabilities in place, they know the local rules and regulations, and they will make sure that there's a lot of scheme out there, right, where people can take your concept and modify it and try to sell, copy your product and all that. So you being far away, you don't have hands-on control of what's happening. And so what I've seen is really for people utilizing distributors to start. Now, when you get comfortable down the road, when you have an agent or you have an office there or warehouse, all that capability down the road, you travel there, back and forth, then you can, take it, because when you do it directly, you have more control. When a distributor does it, you don't know what's going on the marketing side. You don't know what the feedback is coming from the customers who are buying product. So for the first timer, that's what I would recommend. Now, there is, for instance, a client that is from, forget what country, Turkey, I believe, she's Turkish, sending product there. And I worked with them for a while. They're selling bikes, buying them here and shipping them there. Now, because that person is from that country, they never utilize a distributor. They have family members there, they have uncles and cousins and whatnot in that country. So they directly sell themselves and they travel there. They speak the language, they know the culture, they know everything. So if that's the case, then that's different. Or if you lived in that country, you are a US citizen, but you live in Istanbul for a long time, you know very well the local market. You come here, you retire from your job, now you want to exporting to that country, then you probably have connection there. So those are the two dynamic that I've seen. But if you just starting from the get-go, utilize a distributor to start. That's the safer way to get started.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question with that. Have you seen any trends in terms of, and again, this is mostly for consumer goods, but have you seen differences in international consumer behavior versus domestic? Because again, as you indicated, this might be best for people that are successful domestically and want to take it internationally. Should they assume that consumer behavior is similar in other countries, or is there research they need to do to establish what that consumer behavior might be, aside from packaging things in their, in the native language? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, the culture is huge. You got to be comfortable, and especially if you attend trade shows, trade mission, you travel to that country, you got to be knowledgeable about the culture. Beyond, like you're saying, labeling or packaging, you want to make sure that, and you don't have to speak that language, that country's language, but you have to know their culture. For example, in Chinese, with the Chinese folks, when you're giving a business card, right, you give it with your two hands, you hand it to them with your two hands. If you do it with one hand, it means something. Or in Japan, if you put you in a meeting in an office and you put your foot, your shoe showing, facing the other person that you're talking to, that's insulting in their culture. So those are the kind of things that you got to be aware of. And you know, you can have high profile meetings with maybe business partners, with, you know, folks that will carry on your product. So yeah, I mean, get some information, utilize, you know, there's all, if you're in the DC area anyway, there's all the international community embassies in DC. And if you know, selling product to Japan, maybe you might talk to the commercial attache, you know, the commercial officer at the Japanese embassy in Washington, DC. You know, get the information you need, learn, be comfortable, travel. You know, that's you know, international trade is just more than selling a product. It takes more, and so you got to be invested into all that, and having the time and the investment. You know, that's what we mentioned. You know, the commitment. It really is challenging sometimes, but you got to do it the right way.
That's very valuable information. And I think the other thing is that when you've got your clients, making them aware, which I know you do with the USIAC, which is right here in Baltimore, because
Absolutely.
they can make those introductions to different embassies, whether it's in DC or going on missions to different countries. Another question that I wanted to ask is e-commerce. Do you have any of your clients that perhaps start selling in the e-commerce arena domestically, but then they're getting into that national market, that international market? Do you ever have any questions or how-tos where that's concerned?
The only client that I have doing e-commerce is based in Annapolis, and they sell apparel, clothing, and they started selling here locally. And then they built a website, and they started getting demand from, you know, Canadian and even some European clientele. And that's how we started. So sometimes the exporting is not just the initiative coming from the exporter or the entrepreneur, but sometimes it's really based on demand. So I've seen that. Then they built, you know, they have a local website, then they revamp the website, invest into it. And then it becomes, you know, a very sophisticated website where people can trust and swipe their credit card or payment information. And that's something also you have to make sure, if that's your, you know, money revenue channel, you have to invest into it, because people have to trust, you know, do you have a PayPal, for example, on your website where people can trust and buy the product? What just testimony do you have on your website? What claim do you make? You know, if you say, hey, you know, if you buy my product, regardless where you are in the world, within a week, product will be at the door step, then the product got to be there on time, because people can easily, you know, get on Yelp and for local folks, but also even internationally, and trust your company. And so, you know, make sure any engagement you know, anything you said on your website, that you keep your word and that you're doing it right way. You know, that's what I've seen. But, you know, selling on selling online has been only with one client, and it really based on demand that they started reaching out to international clientele. They didn't just build a website and say, hey, I'm going to sell to Canada tomorrow. It's because folks from Canada started demanding and asking. That's how they grow the, you know, the international platform.
Well, thank you. This has been very, very informative, helpful. You're right on target. And any of our viewers, please feel free to reach out to Gabe, reach out to the Maryland SBDC, as well as we have SBDCs around the country. And please feel free to do that. Thank you once again, Gabe. I really appreciate your participation in this.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. At this point, I'd like to now move on to Custom and Border Protection. Craig is a representative from that agency, and he will then jump into how this works. I mean, we have a port here in Baltimore, and that's how your product is going to move from, you know, a truck, from a carrier onto a ship. Obviously, it can be on an airplane, it can be in all different vehicles, but at this point, we're going to focus in on this ship and the Port of Baltimore, and there's ports around the country. So I'd like to invite Craig to please, you've got the platform, and I thank you for joining us.
So thank you, Karen. We can get our presentation up.
It's coming.
We'll get it rolling, no worries. Perfect. So as Karen said, my name is Craig, my whole name, Craig Clark. I'm a trade outreach coordinator within the Office of Trade Relations. I've been with CBP for about 13 years, and prior to my work in Office of Trade Relations, that's been about 2 years. I was a branch chief in the Office of Field Operations, and those are the folks who are actually in the ports, airports, seaports, land border crossings, all of that. So a little bit about my office. I want to tell you kind of who we are and why I'm here. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the Office of Trade Relations, or you might hear me say OTR, as with many things government, it's alphabet soup all the time. But that falls directly under the Office of the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And the reason that this is so important for you and really all of industry is because that's the highest authoritative office within CBP. So that allows me to pull in basically all the right resources that you might need. We've got colleagues that can reach back to the ports of entry if needed. You know, whatever's required, we can basically ensure that you get the right expert to speak to when you have questions or concerns. And so, you know, much like what Gabe was just talking about, there's a lot of intricacies in the agency and in all of the agencies really, and it can feel overwhelming. I just want to, the overarching theme of my presentation is going to be that OTR is here for you. If you are stuck, if you're running into trouble, if you've done something wrong, if you don't know which is the next step, reach out to my office and we will help you out. It's sort of some of my office's responsibilities. You know, we're responsible for industry engagement. So, you know, we focus on disseminating, you can stay on this slide. I'm sorry, I should have told you that. Go back 2 slides, please. There we go, thank you. We focus on dissemination of information. We solicit input from both the trade, you know, you guys, and other partner government agencies. We enforce the laws of something like, I think it's now up to 48 other agencies at the border. You know, there might be something like a new executive order or a new trade agreement like the new USMCA, some new legislation that might require a little bit more explanation and engagement. In all of those kinds of cases, we're the key office that works within CBP, those partner government agencies like Census or, you know, FDA, and even with representatives from the industry, from trade. So what we do is we basically support those strategies that allow us to get that information out to you as quickly and as timely as possible. There's a lot of policy changes, trade-related issues that come up that impact you know, costs to industry, those kinds of things. We are just there to make sure that you are brought up to speed as quickly as possible. So our focus basically is, you know, you can boil it down to transparency, stakeholder advocacy, and collaboration. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be, through this presentation, sharing some good resources with you today. All of them are focused on trying to help you prepare to have a successful importing and exporting business, but it's all within the regulatory framework of CBP. So the next slide, please. So you saw on that first slide that there was a mention of the Commercial Operations Advisory Committee. This is the COAC. You might hear about that. This is something that my office is in charge of. It's not going to be admittedly super relevant to you as a small business owner all the time, but I wanted you to be aware of what it is. It's a statutory committee that was established under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. You hear that called FACA, F-A-C-A. We hold these quarterly meetings, which are announced by publishing a Federal Register notice. And what happens in those meetings is basically the work of the COAC, which is done in those quarters through working groups and subcommittees is just reported out. So the public knows that this is what the trade has recommended CBP do. And this is a little discussion about whether or not we agree. And if we do, how we might implement it. They're pretty interesting meetings. They kind of give you a good taste of how nuanced and diverse CBP's interaction with the industry can be. It's only 20 members. These are members who are vetted through security clearances and all of that kind of thing from the trade side, so industry representatives. And there's 2 government co-chairs and 2 government deputy co-chairs. And one of the biggest things that we pay attention to as part of the provisions in FACA are that there's an equitable distribution of industry representation. So, we're not going to have 17 brokers, 1 surety, and 2 express carriers. You know what I mean? It's going to be spread out over the industry so that we get a good perspective from everybody. Next slide, please. So this is something that's very important for you. The Small Business Regulatory Enforcement Fairness Act, you'll hear it called the very clumsy acronym SBREFA. But it's very important for you to understand. It's been around for a long time, signed by President Bill Clinton in March of 1996. My office manages all of those cases that we receive from the Small Business Administration on behalf of CBP. And what happened is the commissioner of CBP designated the executive director, that's sort of the head boss in my office, as the regulatory fairness representative. And what that means is basically we serve as the impartial party between the international trade community and senior CBP managers to respond to small business comments. Now, comments is a nice way to say complaint, because that's what we get from the Small Business Administration. We will get these complaints that are based on sort of the whole purpose of SBREFA. It's giving you that voice within the federal agencies, as you kind of go through regulatory compliance and enforcement processes. It makes sure that you're not experiencing unfair regulatory enforcement actions by federal agencies, and that you've got some way to comment on them if you do. So next slide. It will talk about how you can go about filing a comment. So this is just a very quick description. That link is a good link to hang on to. Gives you a description of what you need to do once you've downloaded that form and how to send it. You might ask who can file a complaint. You as the small business owner, small business representatives, nonprofit organizations, even small government entities, small government being like a population of 50,000 or less, can file these complaints. But one of the things you need to know is that filing that comment doesn't sort of like suspend or cancel, modify, replace any legal or administrative processes or other mandates for a more formal review that an agency may require. So you kind of need to continue to pursue any and all rights under legal and administrative agency proceedings that are in your best interest. But this is a very quick overview of this, and my office, like I said, is charged with education and outreach for SBREFA. My contact information you'll see later. If you have further questions on this, happy to talk about them at the end of the presentation and any other time that you feel like you need to reach out. Next slide, please. So trade engagement is sort of our bread and butter. We host all kinds of trade engagement events to keep you up to speed on newest developments within CBP. In the last couple of years, COVID has wreaked havoc upon the landscape, and in the early days, obviously there was a massive disruption to supply chains, and we threw together some very quick outreach events to sort of give people the most up-to-date information on what to do and what was actually happening, what we were seeing, and working through some of those challenging problems. So it's something that can be done very quickly. It's also something that can be done in a more planned way, where we have topics to talk about, and we just want to continue education and outreach. We work with a lot of the CBP component offices to facilitate this kind of outreach and engage with the international business community. That also includes reaching out to international associations, a lot of the big organizations, and even governments, World Customs Organization being one that comes to mind. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the big ways that we stay engaged with the trade. The trade symposiums, very big. Of course, COVID, as I said earlier, sort of disrupted all normal life, and we have not had a trade symposium since 2019. I was planning on flying out to LA to get it sort of rolling the week after COVID shut down all of our offices in 2020. So we have not had a real deal trade symposium for a couple of years, but we are having one this year. It's going to be out in Anaheim from July 19th through the 20th. So keep your eyes on the CBP website for a registration link, which will be coming soon. There will be virtual options available, attendance. So, it's a cost saver, and, still as we're emerging from, our COVID hellscape, it's for safety reasons as well. But the trade symposiums are huge. They're very, I mean, this is my CBP nerd hat that I have to wear, but they're really a lot of fun because there's just so many topics that are talked about. It's just a real good event. Sort of on the smaller scale, we have these trade roundtables and trade days. The trade roundtables are generally very, very local. We'll hold them with cooperation of some CBP field office. We're happy to organize them basically around any topic and any time. So if you had something you wanted to talk about, you could reach out and we can help you there. Trade days are a bit more intimate. We tend to have them with only a couple, stakeholders at a time, and it's speaking to basically some senior executives. And it just is another way that we try to stay engaged with you guys. Next slide, please. All right, so this is my favorite part of my job, the trade messaging. It's here just to kind of let you know, I can't emphasize enough how my office is here for you. It does not matter if I'm speaking to 2 people or if I'm speaking to 2,000 people, we're happy to do it. We just want you to know that we make ourselves available to you, and especially to the small business community. So if you've got stumbling blocks, if you have even just, even if you haven't pursued a path where you're trying to get into business with CBP and, you're touching on our regulations, we can sort of assuage your concerns and get you talking to somebody so that you get some education and understand better about what you're about to do. But we do it through speaking engagements. We have a very robust webinar program. Our webinars now, I think it used to be able to support 1,000 people, and now I think it's much more than that. I apologize, I don't have the number, but in any case, very large audiences that we can reach out to. And we use social media pretty extensively. So social media and our webpage give a lot of sort of up-to-date information as well. Next slide, please. Oops, I'm sorry, that is a misplaced slide on my problem. One more slide, please. Thank you. My fault. This is a just kind of quick and dirty one-stop shopping slide for you. It gives you some really good resources for information. Of course, with all this technology back and forth in our virtual work environment that we've had for the past couple of years, you'd think that we would have gotten this right by now, but occasionally these links are broken. So if you cannot access these links, get in touch with me, or I will send through Karen, the actual content behind these links. But one of the resources you'll see at the end of this presentation, it's a video that's for new and existing importers to learn the process of importing goods and merchandise from foreign countries into the United States. Our hope, of course, is that it'll help ensure that you maintain compliance with US laws and regulations. It's really just a good depiction. It's very easy to understand, but it's a good depiction of the importing process and what's expected of an importer. It touches on a lot of the topics that you might not even know are relevant to you yet. And it's one of the first things that we tell people to watch when they're thinking of starting to do business with us, with CBP. There's a slide coming up that's going to talk a little bit about the kinds of export issues that CBP focuses on. And I know that that's a great focus for you growing your international footprint. But I wanted to include this importing video because you're all going to be importers at some point. You'll be importing material from different countries, raw material to manufacture your goods. And it's just really extremely important for you to understand the importing process because even though you're exporting, you're almost certainly going to be importing something that will ultimately be exported, the raw material to make your goods. To me on this slide, though, the most important link is the one for basic importing and exporting information. It's incredibly robust what's behind that link. I strongly encourage you to explore that page. It's on the public facing website. So of course it's not shiny and pretty, it's a government website, but there's a lot of info there. So even though that title says basic, there are little tabs that will lead you down many paths, and you'll discover some very detailed information on both importing and exporting. You'll also see here some USMCA resources. This is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. That's a new trade agreement between those three countries. It entered into force in July of 2020, and it's what replaced NAFTA, if you're familiar with that, the North American Free Trade Agreement. CBP's established a lot of really good resources to help you understand this agreement and how it's potentially going to impact your business. There are something like 47 something USMCA fact sheets that are on the cbp.gov website. So it's going to be everything from administrative guidance to like how you handle things like waste and scrap. So it's pretty detailed. Again, can't encourage you enough to visit that site and just kind of explore. Most of the fact sheets you'll see are going to be intuitive. Even for some of the complicated things where if any of you have tried to determine origin, that's a very complex process, but there is a really good fact sheet there that breaks that down in a way that's very easy to understand and less intimidating. There's also something a lot of people we found when we did outreach for this more than a year ago. There was a question about the differences between USMCA and NAFTA, and there is now a nice description on the USMCA page of cbp.gov. Apologies. I've included a link to that SBRIFA notification that we talked about earlier, and also these e-commerce links. They're links to flyers and best practices. You might find those helpful. The one on the Consumer Awareness Guide for COVID-19 is primarily focused around counterfeit goods, and it is import focused. It may not be relevant to you, but I just wanted you to have that info at your fingertips. And like I said before, if these links aren't working when you either get a copy of this presentation or however these resources are made available, just reach out to me and I'll fix it for you. Next slide, please. Oops. Are we missing our export slide? Well, it looks like we are. It's no worries. I can tell you just a little bit on exports, as I said. This is something that you know, a lot of different agencies are engaged in export oversight overall. And CBP's focus is really on things like unauthorized military technology and munitions, smuggled currency, weapons, other licensable technologies. As you get more familiar with this universe, you'll hear the term dual use, goods and ammunition, goods that are in violation of trade sanctions, stolen vehicles, used vehicles, you know, other violations of US law. There is a bit of a resource here that I'm sorry you don't have the slide to see. I'll put this email address in the chat so everyone has it, but it is OFO-export-cargo at cbp.dhs.gov, G-O-V. And that is an email address that you can send to for export guidance. There are some export specialists who can help you out with that. But mainly, we support the regulation and oversight of a lot of our partner agencies in this area. So just really want to tell you that export compliance obviously is very important. It's good to watch out for all of those things that I just talked about. You know, basically, if it falls into one of those categories, you just need to be extra vigilant. If you have like very specific export questions, you know, email that address that I mentioned, or you can, like always, get in touch with me or my office, and we can put you in contact with an export specialist in the cargo area that you're dealing with. So now we'll jump next slide to the Centers of Excellence and Expertise. This is just another sort of one-stop shopping. A few years ago, we centralized some expertise, for lack of a better word, in these virtual environments, broken out by commodity. So I've listed them here. And this is the email addresses for each of them. And then at the bottom is the USMCA Center. That is the same as the on the resources slide. That's the same email address. This is a good resource for if you are doing business cross-border with Mexico and Canada, or Canada. And next slide, please. There you go. This one, of course, very important for you. This is my contact info. That email address at the top under the Office of Trade Relations, the SB Relations at cbp.dhs.gov, that is small business relations at cbp.dhs.gov. You can email that inbox, and other people along with myself monitor that and respond or get you responses. Or you can just go straight to me, and that's my email address there. I will tell you the phone number listed is my desk phone. And since we are still in a work from home environment in many ways, it might be easiest to send that through email if you have any inquiries. So I think what we'll do now is show this video. Up there's our export.
Sorry
There
about
it is.
that.
No worries. I'm glad everyone has it. That's all that matters. So that's the export slide that we were looking for. That email address there is what you can send when you have export questions or troubles, or you just need to speak to somebody. Happy to do that. And I'm, of course, like I said, and I told you I can't emphasize it enough, I'm going to say it again. You can always be in touch with me, and I can help coordinate for you. We understand that CBP is big and scary sometimes, so we're here to break it down and make it a little easier for you. All right, so with that, why don't we spend a few minutes on, it's about a 5-minute video on some of the importing process, and then we'll come back.
Well, while we're waiting for the video to come up, perhaps I can ask a few questions that kind of come to mind in this whole process of exporting. And probably the first one that jumps in there is the broker business, small business responsibility, the relationship. How does all of that work? How does that work? And who's really responsible at the end of the day for if something goes wrong, but I've hired someone to be able to go ahead as a broker, as a freight forwarder? Now what do I do? And who's responsible and who's going to come back at me in making certain that things are right? How do we address those questions?
Well, that is a huge question with many. I mean, we could literally speak for another hour on all of that, but I can tell you the really distilled version of who's responsible is you are. You are always responsible for this information. You need to make sure that you know your supply chain, make sure that you know who you're doing business with. Keep all of your paperwork, keep all of your documentation, and just have backup info basically. But a broker relationship is just extremely valuable to establish. This is something that they're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, both on the import and export side of things. It's it isn't a free service. This is something that should be built into your expenses and kind of understand, or at least I would recommend that that you have a line item for expenses related to this broker experience. But I can tell you it's a lot cheaper than non-compliance. And of course, it's not just non-compliance from CBP's perspective. Like I said, we enforce the laws of 40 something other agencies. And these brokers are extremely good at their jobs. They are licensed. They, have to take exams to hold these positions, and they know what's up. They know how to get things in and out of the country in a compliant way. So I always recommend establishing a broker relationship to help with that. But I like I said, we could literally talk for days on sort of the role of the broker and how they can be helpful. But I would just emphasize that even though it is an expense, it's much less an expense than having your being hit with penalties or liquidated damage claims, or even having your cargo seized. It's much less expensive than that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think that we're ready for the video, and then we'll have maybe a few more questions at the end after the video, but thank you. That's very insightful.
Everyone goes to the website, you can click that link to the video, and it's a good only 5 minutes, but it's a good outline.
Absolutely. And we really appreciate that. And perhaps I'll ask one more question before we wrap this up. And because you touched on the e-commerce just for a moment, and over these past probably 6 weeks here in Maryland, we've kind of experienced a ship that left out of the Port of Baltimore and unfortunately got stuck and was stuck for about maybe 5 or 6 weeks. It just this past weekend, it was able to get back into the channel. However, it had to turn around and go back into the port, as well as during this 5 or 6 week period, they start unloading some of the containers and took them back into the Port of Baltimore. At what point do you get involved in any of that shipment going back and forth? Because now my understanding is they had to open up some of these containers to make certain that if there was something in there that was that only had a shelf life of X, that they had to review that. Is there any point that you get involved in any of that?
So I would probably have to defer this kind of a question to my Office of Field Operations colleagues. They would be the sort of frontline CBP force that would be doing examinations, cargo examinations like that. But the short and too simple answer is yes, we would be involved in that. But this is a very unique sort of situation, and I don't know exactly all of the processes that went into and got put into play when the cargo was taken back to the port, even because I don't know how it even arrived at the port, when the ship was still stuck. It's a really interesting case, and I'm just unfortunately not familiar enough with the all of the details to be able to help you out too much there. But we can certainly get some more detail from our OFO colleagues and report back.
Okay, I think it's always an interesting, because if I'm a small exporter and I put some of my goods into one of the containers that was shared by other small exporters, and the supply chain just got stopped, what are the issues? What are the possibilities? What are the next steps and the timelines around it? So that would be good information.
Yeah, sure.
As we all start out doing this in a small degree and then move on to being a larger exporter. But in the beginning, it's really critical that oftentimes we know how that supply chain works. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that scenario is definitely outside the norm of how a supply chain would normally work. But you do bring up an interesting point that small businesses, especially, can help having a little bit of an understanding about is when you're shipping goods in and out or to and from the United States. You're typically going to be commingled, as we say, with other importers and exporters, who don't have enough goods to fill, a giant container. And so you're going to have, maybe another 200 importers or exporters in the container with you. And that's why these kinds of outreach events and just sort of these conversations with the trade are very important, so that everybody gets educated and you're on the same, we're all singing from the same sheet of music, as it were, because we don't want you to be mixed in with people who really don't know what they're doing. And because when they don't know what they're doing, they're going to get banged up for violations, and it's going to slow your cargo down too, because you're in that container with them. So in as much as you can understand your supply chain and who's moving what, where, and when, that's always a good thing. And then, of course, getting everybody educated and compliant is even better, and that's why we do what we do and why we exist. So, just know, again, I'm going to say it again, there's no dumb questions. Everybody's new at, once, and everybody's got to learn. So reach out to us. We will help you. We have every interest in helping you be successful.
And I want to thank you, Craig, and also Gabe, for making this final session so successful and full of information, resources, and how-to and next steps. And I want to thank everyone. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get back to us at exportevents.com and all of the resources that have provided valuable information over these last 4 sessions. And we will have a contact list up on the website as well, so that you'll have a direct, downloadable resource guide to go to the next steps. Thank you so much, and everybody have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.